Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of my boxing hangouts, and this one a very special one I've been looking forward to for quite a while because we have a very special guest on. Now, the name of this show is the Boxing Hangouts because for the most part we have boxing guests on here, but today we're going to dip our toes into the world of mixed martial arts and in the process talk also to a guy who knows lots and lots about the world of boxing and who is a great boxing fan as well. And Dan, you set this up. Dan Parks, the producer of our Hangouts, and I know it was fun for you to get this set up and have a chance to visit with the gentleman we're going to visit with today.
Absolute, another dream come true. I had the opportunity to meet him several years ago, and let me just say again what an incredible day today is. Here I am with two Hall of Famers from my two favorite sports in the world. It doesn't get any better for a boxing fan and MMA fan than this for me today. Amazing.
Well, I hope we'll channel through you all the stuff that people will want to hear. And the gentleman we're talking about is just a wonderful guy who I've had the privilege of working with on one occasion at least, and he's was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame on July 6th. He was the first welterweight champion ever in the UFC, and he is a legend in mixed martial arts, Mr. Pat Miletich. Pat, welcome.
Thank you, Al. Thanks for having me, Dan.
It's so great to have you here. We were wanting to do this for a little bit, and finally, Dan and I both said we got to get Pat on here because you're such a delight. You're such an important guy in your sport, one of the icons of mixed martial arts. And I know from working with you that you're also a boxing fan, and you have history in your family that's fascinating because your uncle was a terrific boxer, wasn't he?
Yeah, Johnny. His name was Johnny Miletich, but it's kind of funny. He was on the 1932 Olympic boxing team, and he changed his last name from Miletich to Myler because he didn't want his mother to know he was fighting.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and also because the ring announcers couldn't pronounce Miletich.
How hard is that?
It can be difficult for a few folks.
I guess.
But he was very successful. Fought Maxie Rosenblum twice for the world title. Lost a split decision and had a draw, I think, once. And both times the crowds rioted because he had beat up Maxie Rosenblum. But he fought Joe Louis when they were amateurs. Beat up Joe Louis when they were amateurs. And there's a lot of legend about him. But his trip to Los Angeles to try out for the U.S. boxing team, he and three friends went together because he had gone from the coal mines and farming area down in southern Iowa up to Detroit and got a job there, and then the Depression hit, so he ended up boxing to make money. But he and his friends took a Model A or Model T, whatever it was, out to L.A. All four tires went flat, arrived there on the rims, and he won the spot on the U.S. Olympic team, and because he won the spot, there was a wealthy guy there watching and said, let me put new rims and tires on your car for you so you can get home, and gave them traveling money so they could get back home. It was a pretty amazing story.
That's a great story. That is wild. So your roots in combat sports go back a ways, all the way. And for you, wrestling and mixed martial arts became the way you channeled your interest in mixed martial arts. For some of the younger fans that are, and I know you've probably said some of this before, but I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard it. In the early days, when you were a mixed martial artist and trying to compete in the UFC and before, it was a much different world, wasn't it, than what we know now in mixed martial arts?
It definitely was. I mean, there were a lot of athletic commissions. Most athletic commissions, obviously, wanted nothing to do with it.
Right.
The powerful folks in boxing and the athletic commissions and the politicians, it has had a negative spin put on it, and people, generally frowned upon the sport. But we knew what it was going to take was for money to get involved and powerful people to get on board. And what it ultimately came down to, I learned during the process that the argument didn't lie with the safety of the athletes, because we know that football, with the NFL going through the lawsuits, we know with boxing and all these impact sports, truly impact sports, that, hey, it's never going to be 100% safe.
Right.
Boys are going to be boys. They're going to play rough. That's just the way it is. But I knew that in time that the argument came down to money. If everybody could share the money, then the sport would survive. So, I had to change the angle of my debates because I crushed several politicians in live debates on TV and made them look pretty bad, but they still banned the sport in their state.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it came down to how they could make money and tax it.
You won the argument, but lost the war temporarily, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
So, Pat, I was looking at a video the other day of you performing as an MMA fighter, and which I've done in the past, but then reminding myself there was some great clips, not only of you in action, but after the fight, one of the fights, you just said right into the camera, and I thought it was so great, without bravado, without anything that made it seem like you were being braggadocious. You just looked and you said, look, I found a way to win tonight. I'm going to find a way to win, and that's just the way it is. You had that attitude going into the cage.
Yeah, it was more, I think, out of necessity than anything else. The confidence wasn't necessarily there because I was a great athlete, better than everyone else. It was just simply the necessity of needing to win to pay bills and things like that. So for me, it was ensuring that my mother had gotten sick and financially things were pretty tough, and that's what kind of spurred my career to even happen. One, because I love to compete, but two, some bills needed to be paid, and my mom was in a tough spot. So I simply I hated to lose because I love to win a lot more than I hate to lose. But it came down to if you lose in MMA, you only get half the money. So it was very important to win, be able to make house payments, and keep the refrigerator with some food in it.
And you alluded to the fact, and I had read this, that your mom had gotten ill. You were going to go off to college. You were ticketed to do that. I just saw Billy Crystal's 700 Sundays, where he talks about his dad passing away. And my dad passed away when I was young, and I was in the same position as you, being with a single mom, and it's a very difficult position. It forces you to grow up as a man, and the way you comport yourself in that instance says a lot about a person. So I think it's interesting that, knowing the kind of guy you are, it doesn't shock me that you just had to get in and take care of things.
Well, there was one day that I was working 3 jobs when I had left college, and I was working 3 jobs. I was pouring concrete during the day, and then at night I would bartend or bounce at different nightclubs. And in between those jobs, after I got done pouring concrete, I would train for kickboxing and boxing matches. And then the UFC started, and I worked my way up and was able to quit one job at a time. And it's just I think there was a day where I got back from pouring concrete, and I thought, this is not going to be my life. I'm not going to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that, earning a buck, working your tail off pouring concrete, but I knew that wasn't my destiny. And more than anything else, I think people that reach successful points, or what they deem successful in their own mind, their own vision, happens because they convince themselves, they actually trick themselves into believing they can do it. And once you trick yourself into believing you can do it and selling yourself on it, and you have the work ethic to follow up on those dreams and the visions you have, that's the only way it's gonna happen. And no matter what, no matter how tough things got, I would go to the gym and I would get my workouts in and kept that dream alive, and that it worked out. But I also got to a point where I said, if I don't win a world title, my back was in a corner, and I kind of gave myself an ultimatum, and I said, if I don't win a world title, I was considering, honestly, Al, that I was gonna end my life. I was that determined to win.
Oh my!
So I knew that it was. I think it came down to not giving yourself a choice. There can be no options when you set out on a mission.
That's motivation. And you, of course, did become world champion, and you had a terrific UFC career, one that culminated on July 6th with you being inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Now, the interesting part of all that is you were a little surprised that they made the call to you. You had strained relations with Dana White because of an incident that happened with, I think, one of their shows they were going to do. And he explained that when he introduced you to get the Hall of Fame honor, and you made the point that you thought they handled things in a pretty adult, intelligent way when they came back to you to bring you into the Hall of Fame, which it seemed to me they did as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Dana and I have butted heads for a lot of years in the media for numerous reasons. Things that, whether were directed at me or athletes that I was training or anything like that. And I'm a stubborn guy. I grew up, when I was young, I was the skinny guy that got picked on by everybody. My brothers were all 6'5", 6'6", huge guys. So trust me, I got the last serving of all the food on the dinner table. So I'm a guy that has kind of always, I've always gone chest to chest with the bully whenever I can, and I felt that at times things got the power was being used a little bit inappropriately, but they did handle it very well, and there's no use in I'm too hard-headed for my own good many times in life, and I think
aren't we all?
Yeah, and you get to a certain point in life where you go, do I really want enemies? I really don't. And especially really powerful ones, Al.
Well, you listen. First of all, one of the things that was said there was no one could possibly deserve to be in the UFC Hall of Fame more than you, and not having you in there would make it a sham. And so I think they were understanding of that, and that was a great honor, to be sure, because you are. When people say you're a pioneer or something. Sometimes the connotation is, they were first, but in your case, you were among the first, but you're also among the best, and that I think is great. So I congratulate you on that. That's it's fantastic. I want to bring Dan in here for this next part, because now we're going to talk about Pat Miletich, the trainer who created his own system of fighting. And Dan, you've created it. You've had many camps and different situations where people could come and train with you. And the story that Dan's about to tell and ask you about, I think speaks volumes about you as a person. Dan, explain how you first encountered Pat Miletich.
Well, it was a really amazing weekend. There is a program that is out there, and I have a slide for it that I can show you all. It is called the Paradise Warrior Retreats, and these have been going on since probably 2004. Pat can probably correct me if I'm wrong on that. Quite a while. This is the next one that they're getting ready to do with Machida and Henzo, and as you can see, it's a really fascinating program that they do where people like myself, who's not really a fighter, I'm more of what you would call a hobbyist, right? I'm somebody who loves to train, and so you get an opportunity to go train with the legends. And I had a chance to go to one that Pat was involved in, and Boss Rutan was there, and Gofor, and Benny the Jet. I mean, these are all huge legends for me. And I was a little apprehensive going to it on the very first day, and I went to show up at the training facility early because I wanted to get there early and make sure I had a chance to scout things out. And again, a little concerned about it, as I was over 40, and I was worried I was going to be training with a bunch of stud 20-year-olds. And instead, the guy who's standing at the door before me to get in early was Pat Miletich. And he's there, and he's one of our instructors of the day, and here he is early, and I talked to him, and I told him I was a little concerned. He says, "Listen, don't worry about it. This is what we're going to be doing, and you'll be able to handle it." And he gave me a little mini motivation chat, and then a few more people showed up. The doors open early. Now, Pat could have went and stood against a wall or sat up on the thing. Pat's out pulling mats on the floor with the rest of them. He's helping us get everything set up for the crew. And it really showed me a lot about, here's this great UFC champion, and the humility and the modesty, and then that day, he kicked our ass all day. And he was lying to us because I was getting ready to throw up from the abuse that he put us through that day. But it was an amazing experience, and it told me a lot about the character of a man, of how they act when there's no cameras, there's nothing around. How are they going to... And I was just really, really impressed with you that day, Pat, and I learned a great deal from you that day. That was awesome.
Well, I really appreciate that, Dan. And in wrestling, in that world, when you've got wrestling mats that are in a wrestling room, and the team has a wrestling meet that night, and the mats need to go out to the gymnasium and be put on the basketball floor for the meet, who do you think has to do that? Well, it's the coaches and the wrestlers. The whole team does it, and we drag the mats out there, we roll them up, we put them on the carriers and do our thing. So, that's just the way things are. You help move things, and that's just the way it is. It really doesn't matter who you are or who people even really should think you are. It should never be different.
That's the correct attitude. Not everybody has that attitude, unfortunately. But so you, as a coach, and I want to talk about that for a second or two, because it's you've had three different aspects of your career, and we're going to get to broadcasting in a moment or two. But as a coach, you are renowned in the world of mixed martial arts. You strike me as the kind of person, correct me if I'm wrong, who always thought they were going to end up coaching other people. Is that a fair statement or no?
I think it is, because I had great influence, and we talked earlier about our fathers not being around and things. So the guys that influenced me were the guys that coached me in football and wrestling and boxing when I was younger, and they had a great impact on my life. So and the way it worked out in MMA, because the sport was so new, there were really at the time it started, there weren't that many athletes in the sport. Yeah. So when I started, I thought, holy cow, I've got to hurry up and train a bunch of guys to get really good so I have good training partners. But also, I thought, here's my chance to really show people that I know what I'm talking about, at least, as I put this team together and assemble it and get that snowball rolling and do something great. That way, when I open my gyms, my regular gyms, people can say, yeah, that guy knows what he's doing. And so it was kind of a combination of all those things.
I'm going to go sideways here, and because and bring it up to date in current mixed martial arts training. And I know Dan has a slide or two to show here. One of the things that some of the many of the mixed martial artists are doing they're utilizing boxing trainers to help with their striking. One, I want to ask you, do you think that's a good, like, for instance, Freddie Roach is working with fighters, with the MMA fighters. Also, Joel Diaz, who's a very fine boxing trainer, is working with some fighters. Do you think that's a good idea, and has it helped MMA fighters you've seen?
It definitely helps. There's nothing, you're not going to get any better striking than sparring with, number one, world-class boxers. I was really lucky. I was at Pena's Davenport Boxing Club when I was younger, and then I started back up as an adult when I was doing kickboxing and MMA. Here's a guy, I grew up wrestling, but I boxed enough to know that I needed to go back down there and spar with guys like Michael Nunn, Antoine Eccles, David Levi, the McGowan brothers.
Not many better than those.
No, and I made it my goal. It took me 3 years to stop donating blood down there. I really got my ass kicked a lot. But I got to a point, it took me 3 years, and I finally dropped a really good fighter. I dropped him. And that's with, 16-ounce gloves and everything.
Sure, yeah.
At that point, I thought, okay, I'm good enough now. I can survive 12 rounds with world-class guys, world champs. We can battle, go at it in the gym. Yeah. And I knew that nobody in MMA was going to hurt me striking. Right. It just wasn't going to happen. When you're used to sparring with Michael Nunn and guys like that, you're just not going to get a guy that can outstrike him. Maybe a guy that's comparable would be Anderson Silva.
Somebody like that,
athleticism. Sure. But it's just it's so rare. But yes, more so if you have someone who understands, you have to understand the different stances and the different type of movement. But the greatest strikers in Muay Thai have boxing footwork, boxing head movement, along with the Muay Thai offensive techniques. Obviously, you have to know how to block kicks correctly so you don't get hurt. But boxing footwork and boxing head movement and defensive skills surpass anything in any striking art there is.
And, here's where I want to get into momentarily, at least a little bit, this boxing MMA thing, because, I always say some boxing fans are not understanding of the way striking is different in mixed martial arts, because you can't always set down on your punches for a variety of reasons that I am certainly not expert on, but at least I've gained an understanding by watching MMA, being around people like you and Stephen Quadros and Frank Shamrock and people who I've heard talk about it. You can't judge a mixed martial artist in striking based on a boxer, because you guys have so many other things to worry about in the way you end up initiating your strikes. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it definitely, you have to look out for a lot more. You have to be very careful of, if I'm heavy on my front foot throwing my jab and really trying to stick somebody with a jab, they can bury low kicks on my lead leg and devour my lead leg and destroy it. If I throw a hard cross and I'm really bearing down on it and really trying to hurt them with it, well, it's easy to get taken down at that point. So there's a lot of things. You can't feed a kick to a guy who's a good wrestler, because obviously you're giving a wrestler your leg and you get dumped on your head. So there's a lot of different things going on. I think, though, the nimbleness of the footwork, that's the one thing that I paid attention to, was the Mayweathers and the Roy Joneses. Roy Jones,
Michael Nunn had the greatest footwork ever.
Yeah, he was amazing. And so a lot of that quick footwork and that pity pat with your feet when you punch enables you to always be on balance, and your weight's kind of 50-50. And I think that's actually the best footwork for MMA, because you can get yourself in and out, cut angles easily, get out of trouble, stop takedowns. You're light enough on your feet to block a kick, do whatever you got to do. So it's actually that's the best footwork for it.
We're going to, after that great explanation, we're going to fast forward now to Pat Miletich, the sportscaster, the announcer, who I happen to think is as good at doing, you're as good at doing your sport as a color analyst as anybody I've ever seen, certainly anybody I've ever worked with. And you have an economy of words during a broadcast, but you are able to explain things so that virtually everyone can understand it without the people that are more advanced feeling like you're dumbing it down to them, which is an extraordinary skill, and you do that well. Did you think you would get into broadcasting? Seems like something you weren't seeking but sought you out.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story with that, Al. I was, thank you. I love calling fights, but all of you guys over at Showtime taught me how to do broadcasting, which was great. David Dinkins, he actually chewed my butt once or twice a little bit from the truck, which was great.
I'm shocked at that.
You know how David can be pretty aggressive at times.
He's the only human on earth with enough balls to chew your ass. You know what I'm saying? Really? Right. Honestly, how stupid does he have to be? Go ahead.
But, in the time that I worked with you, Mora was gone. Obviously, something was going on with his family or whatever, but I thought, wait a minute, I'm working with who? And so I was terrified, because I thought, oh God, he's just not probably going to be a nice guy, because I'd heard so many of the stories about the guys over at HBO. You know who I'm talking about? Yeah,
I understand.
So I thought, oh boy, this is going to be rough. And you were the nicest guy in the world. You treated me really well and made it. It was like we worked together for 20 years, which was awesome. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate that. But in terms of economy of words and things, I think watching sports my whole life, nothing has bothered me more than somebody who runs on forever.
Absolutely.
Talking about something, I sit there and go, wow, just shut up and let me
shut up.
Exactly. But just tell me what's going on. Why are they blitzing the linebackers? Why are they calling the stunts? Why is that tennis player able to put better spin on the ball? Whatever technical aspects, and then shut up. And so that's something that I actually kind of get a hard time a little bit now and then about not saying enough. But a lot of times I think less is more, right?
No, I think it is. And you, a perfect example is, you talked about the time we got to work together. And for me, of course, it was daunting, because I was doing this sport that it was I think the second MMA show I had done at Showtime. And it's daunting when I'm as the play-by-play guy in there. Of course, I'm just there to tee things up and make sure, though, that I keep things going in the right direction. But one of the great things was when I worked with you and Steven, and I worked with Steven alone, and you guys were so generous in how you took care of me, because you knew that I was in a position that was difficult, and so it works both ways. And one of the things that was so great about it was, when you're doing play-by-play or hosting, you should be able to stay in a safe zone for yourself. And if you're working with a great analyst, they're going to take care of the rest. And that's exactly what you did. And I think your philosophy about the economy of words, that's why I brought it up, because to me it's a huge strength of yours. You say enough, but you don't brutalize us with things that we don't need to hear. And I think, I'll bet, and I would be willing to bet, that all the MMA fighters appreciate the way you approach doing this sport. You're very honest about something that maybe could be done, might be done, but you never denigrate a fighter.
And that's, what I noticed more about any sport in the world, about people who call sports, is tennis is the most brutal sport to be losing at. My wife's a huge fan of tennis, and I love tennis also, but the commentators in tennis will just ride them straight into the ground. And I thought, I really don't ever want to do that to a fighter, because if I do that too much, they could lose, a sponsor, people who give them money, whatever it is, might not, come off right for whatever reason, and these kids need money. So I do my best to say, hey, he could be doing this better.
Right.
This is what he might want to do, but I try to point out more what the other kid's doing right than anything else.
Which is most often why an athletic contest is going that way anyway. Now, you're with Access TV now, and how many shows a year do you do with them generally?
We're doing over 40 shows a year. So
that's a lot.
Yeah, they keep us very busy. We have a blast. It's a tight-knit family. Obviously, we're together almost every Friday night. So it's a lot of great guys on that network. We have a ton of fun.
My goal in broadcasting is to still get to do at least one more show before I go up to that big ring in the sky with Pat Miletich. So somewhere along the line, somebody's going to let me on an MMA show with you, and then I'm going to feel.
Tell Dinkins to get his act together.
Exactly. They need more. They need to get some. They need to get some mixed martial arts. I'm going to tell him that. And you know what? I think I'm going to tell him that you're sick and tired of him talking to you from the truck. So broadcasting has created something obviously really great for you. Now you are an author. Like me, you wrote a book, a terrific book, Blood in the Cage. What kind of process was that for you to get your down on paper? Your experiences and what you went through?
Well, John Wertheim, who's a senior writer at Sports Illustrated, a very brilliant guy, very, very experienced writer, obviously put a lot of that together, but I had to kind of dictate what stories went down. And I am actually writing my own novel now, which is...
Really?
It's fiction based on the reality and the facts of the Federal Reserve Act and the history of central banking in this country.
Wow.
But spun to let's just put it this way: we're tying the history of the Federal Reserve and central banking in with special forces groups that can go back in time.
Wow! Oh, is that what a great idea! Wow, you are the true Renaissance man, and that little description. If that doesn't make somebody want to read a novel, there's a movie there before you even write the novel.
I love it.
Yeah. And I think anybody who's educated on the history of the Federal Reserve and the monetary system that's in place now, whether they're middle of the road politically, far right, far left, I think the people that are in the know are pretty much all in agreement that the Federal Reserve Act was the most treasonous thing ever perpetrated against the American people. So that's something. I know that, and I'm writing this to become a movie. I don't want it to just be a book, and there's going to be more than one book, because I want to educate the American people to what's really going on.
Very good. Well, you are. I mentioned you're a Renaissance man, and you truly are. Now, so the book can still be obtained on Amazon, as can everything on this planet. I'm actually convinced whatever you want to buy, you can find on Amazon. Thank goodness, because then people can find your book. And you alluded to Special Forces. You're involved, and I'm going to bring Dan in a second to talk a little bit about a couple of current MMA things. But you also have a fascinating business endeavor in which called Firehorse Combatives, in which you are involved in training, and I know you've done it in the past, special forces and police and all the rest. Explain that to the folks.
I was sought out about 15 years ago, probably more than that now, probably 17 years ago. A good friend of mine brought me to a training for he's a longtime police officer, and he said, hey, I think that we need to change the way things are done. We need to prepare officers. to be able to deal with what they have to deal with these days. And the mixed martial arts, the art of the wrestling, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the positioning on the ground, the Muay Thai, the boxing, footwork, things like that. It's much different when I train law enforcement as opposed to special forces guys. Obviously, law enforcement are not there to beat people up. They're there to, if they have to control people, keep themselves alive, get out of trouble, and also make sure that they can keep the tools on their belt in their possession.
Good point.
Bad guys. So a lot of it focuses on positioning, getting out of bad situations, bad positions, whether it's on the ground, on the feet, things like that. And I've learned over all the years, because when I first started training law enforcement, I'd say, okay, now I'm going to teach you how to choke a guy. And my buddy pulls me aside and he goes, Pat, you can't teach cops how to choke people unconscious. And I go, why not? And he goes, well, if it's deadly force, they're probably going to pull their gun at that point. And I said, okay, no problem. So I've learned over the years, there's so many different things, that everybody has a camera on their phone now. Cops are more worried about being sued than being killed these days. And that's why we have, we do have a lot of problems with that. Obviously, it keeps everybody in check, keeps the police in check, but also ties their hands and many times can get them in more trouble than not. But yeah, when I'm doing special forces groups, if police walk in a building, kick a door in for a drug raid or whatever, if they're coming at you with their gun and they say down, 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 many times people are so scared that they freeze. So the police officer will simply put their hand on their head and guide them to the ground.
Interesting.
Where if a group of Navy SEALs goes into a house full of terrorists and they say down, 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 and they don't go down, they take a round in the forehead. So it's a totally different mindset between the people that they're having to deal with. So but it is a lot of fun. I enjoy it as much as anything I've ever done.
Oh, it's fascinating. This conversation has been one of the most interesting I've had in ages, I have to tell you. And we'll wrap it up by talking a little bit about the current world in MMA. And Dan has one of the things that is a bugaboo in every sport now, of course, are PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs. And Dan, I read an article which you brought to my attention, and I want you to maybe frame this for Pat, about a current MMA fighter who is now retiring. Explain that to Pat, and maybe we'll get his view a little bit on the current state of where things are at with performance-enhancing drugs in MMA.
Absolutely. The story was from Mark Bocek, who just retired. He was actually on a 3-fight winning streak. And he said some really interesting things, and I'll quote a couple of things from here. He said he agreed when the interviewer asked him if 90% sounded about right on the number of fighters who are using performance-enhancing drugs. And he said 90% sounds about right. And then he said, we can only speculate, we can't put a number on it, but maybe someone like me can go further into this area than your average Joe. Maybe 90% sounds about right. You could say that, yeah. Then he said that, which I thought was a more telling comment, and I'm paraphrasing on this one, but he basically said that if you know that you're going into a fight against somebody who's using performance-enhancing drugs, it's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on all the other fighters to have to use those performance-enhancing drugs, or you get your head smashed. And then you could only blame yourself at that point. And he said there was financial issues that were involved in it, but obviously this is so dramatically different from when you started and you came into the sport. How much is this really affecting the sport, and is the new testing that the UFC is doing going to help this? Is it going to change it or make it better?
In terms of Mark's percentage that he thinks is on performance-enhancing drugs, I don't necessarily agree with that. I know it's a pretty good portion of guys, but 90%, that's pretty dang high. I don't think that's the case. Okay. But, to give you an idea, the first time I wrestled with Matt Hughes, I'd never had any problem dealing with anybody's power. Even the many heavyweights that I worked out with, I never even had a problem with it. I could outquick them if I had to, but I could outstrength a lot of people. But I wrestled with Matt for about 45 minutes, and I'd never felt anything like it in my life. I had that guy in 30 submission holds. I think I got him in trouble one time where I had him in the guillotine. I ran him into a wall. He went limp for a second, and then he woke up and power trained, double-legged me all the way across the wrestling room and threw me on my head and attacked me again. And by the time we got done, you know, I said to him, we were done and we were sitting around relaxing, and I go, "What are you on?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" He looked at me and he goes, "What are you talking about?" And I go, "Seriously," I go, "What kind of steroids are you on?" And he goes, "Don't ever say that to me again. I've never taken a drug in my life, and I never will." And he never did.
Yeah.
He was that strong. He's a farm boy that was a freak.
Yeah.
And so, but I've dealt with guys who've done it. I wrestled guys in college and even high school. One time I wrestled a guy who was on it, and you can definitely tell the difference. Here's the problem that, you know, guys getting the exemptions, which I'm glad is now gone. Those older guys, where their career would be done, they're done fighting, extend their career by 3, 4, 5 years. Now, yes, do they make a lot more money because they're big names? Absolutely. But what people never took into consideration was those guys are extending a career that should have ended 5 years ago, and the damage inflicted on their brains and their joints and everything else. Suddenly, by the time they're done with their career, they're crippled and useless. So it's a very rough sport. It can be a very unforgiving sport, and it definitely gives an advantage to a guy who's on it. But I've also seen guys who use steroids and they gas in the first round because they've gained so much muscle that their heart and lungs aren't used to pumping enough for it. So it just depends, but it's definitely a problem. Obviously, it's in all professional sports. But when you look at a sport where the goal is to inflict damage on another human being, it gets pretty dangerous.
Well, you hit on it, and I'm sorry, Dan. I just think it's unfortunate in probably every sport, but the ones where it is especially difficult are contact sports, you know, like MMA, boxing, football. While it annoys me that somebody's going to hit an extra home run in baseball because of it, at the very least they're not. Or somebody in tennis may be able to have a little more stamina. They're not hurting somebody, so that's that's where you get into a difficult spot.
Go ahead. I had a coach tell me one time, a football coach of mine, say, "Listen, Pat, basketball," and this isn't to say anything bad about what you just said, but he goes, "Listen, Pat, basketball is a contact sport. Right. Football is an impact sport."
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I call it. That's what I call them.
That is a great line. That's a terrific line because basketball. And I played basketball all the way through high school. You bang around, you do whatever. But yeah, it's a different story. I want to, before I let you go, and we will let you go in a second. You've been so patient, and this has been a real joy to get a chance to talk to you. And I hope the many people that look at this will get an even better window into you as a person, because you're just a great guy and a fascinating man. I really appreciate your eclectic view of life, and I can't wait for the novel. By the way, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, and I wrote about it in my book, is this idea that mixed martial arts and boxing have to be enemies, which I find so preposterous. And I understand that some people will like one sport more than the other for a variety of reasons. Mixed martial arts is a more nuanced sport. There are more disciplines. It's different, more complicated in so many ways. Boxing is boxing. It's it's a sport where one of the disciplines in mixed martial arts gets its roots, and so I can understand people liking one more than the other. The part I don't understand is this feeling, and I think it comes maybe, again, you can trace it back to money more than anything else, this idea that there's not enough room in the combat sports tent for both sports. And I know you agree with me that there's plenty of room for both of them under that tent.
Yeah. There's no way that after having experienced dealing with world-class boxers and how good they are at what they do, the precision and the timing and everything else, to not be able to appreciate the perfection of that art, and vice versa with the wrestling and everything else that goes into MMA. But let's be honest, Al. There's a lot of fights in mixed martial arts, even at the highest level, where I can't even watch the fights because they're so bad at striking.
Oh.
Their boxing skills are so weak that I'll look at it and go, how the hell did this guy get on TV?
Mm.
You know, this is atrocious. So I'm a guy that loves combat. Period. I love the art of combat. I love every aspect of it. And for me, because I did it so long and all the different aspects of it, that it all just became combat. It was no longer boxing or kickboxing or wrestling or jiu-jitsu. It was just combat.
Right.
But when you can separate those specialists who do judo, who do jiu-jitsu so well, who do boxing so well, to not appreciate each one of those strands of the rope, you know, and there is room for boxing. There's room for Muay Thai kickboxing and MMA altogether because, it's what other sport parallels life and the struggle of life, and to see it so harshly presented in front of you than a guy who loses in a fight and the guy who wins. And we know life's a hell of a lot rougher than what's in the cage of the ring.
Yeah, well put. Well put.
Pat, quick question. You were mentioning watching and being able to see a fighter and seeing that they're not doing something great. Do you ever reach out to a fighter after a fight if you've seen something that's glaring that you see that they're doing wrong?
That's a good question.
And ever reach out and actually give them a tip or tell them what they did wrong?
I've had a few come up and ask me after the last show we did out in Providence, Rhode Island. I had a fighter come up and he won his fight, but he was getting lit up a little bit standing up, and we talked, and his coach talked to me, and I was giving them a little bit of advice. But more than anything, I think they come up to me the next show we do with that organization, and they'll say, "Hey, I appreciate what you were saying during the fight. I took what you said and have put it into my training and stuff." So I try to do more of it then, where hey, he needs to work on this because I know they're going to watch the replay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great, and that enlightens the viewer too. Pat, this has been a joy. People can get your book, Blood in the Cage. Go on Amazon and get it. Access TV. When's your next show?
We do not have a show this Friday, but pretty much every Friday until the holidays, we've got every Friday night on Access TV. That's on DirecTV or Dish Network, and hopefully everybody. I switched over to Dish Network, so.
There you go. Well, it is that's a whole other story. What do you get? I'm all these different options that are available to people. It's mind-boggling from a technological standpoint, but it creates opportunities. It's interesting because that technology creates the opportunity for a fight series like yours to be available, really.
Right, and it's a lot of fun. It's growing all the time. Our ratings are not released to the public. I don't know why that is off Dish or DirecTV. But the network folks tell us that we're pretty high up in the echelon on the network, which is good to hear.
Yeah, I'm sure. There's great buzz always about your shows, and it's really excellent. Well, listen. This has been one of the most enjoyable times I've ever had interviewing anybody, and I appreciate it. And I was really interested to sit down and get some of your views. I wanted to focus in this one more about you because I think I wanted people to hear you have a chance in this kind of environment, which they don't always, to hear you talk about your views and your life a little bit. Somewhere down the road later, if you're not sick of me, I'll bring you back and we'll have a more up-to-date conversation about some of the things going on in the world of mixed martial arts.
Well, I'd love to, Al, anytime, and thanks for having me, buddy.
Thank you, Pat. Pat Miletich, a true legend in mixed martial arts, and just a solid, wonderful guy, which all of you could see from this interview. Thank you very much, Pat. And Dan, thanks for you for setting this up, and we are moving on. This weekend I've got the Sean Porter fight against Kell Brook, and what do we have cooking for future Hangouts?
Well, we have a couple of things, Al. Coming up at the last week of August, we're going to do an interview with the gentleman who is running the Boxing Expo in Las Vegas.
Ah, yes.
Which is going to be, you're going to be a part of. And then at the end of that week, on Thursday, I believe it's the 26th, we are going to do a show with Matthew Podgorski of the Referee Pod Index, which is a very innovative way of rating MMA and boxing judges. And it's going to be part of our series of discussing possible solutions to how to fix judging in boxing and in MMA.
Great. Well, I hope so. We'll be back with our Hangouts. I hope everybody tunes in this Saturday when we have the Showtime fight with Sean Porter and Kell Brook. Our thanks to Pat Miletich, a great guy, and Dan, thanks to you for setting it up. And we will see you next time on the Hangout.